And of course, our surveillance, as you just described, was so much better. So we did know what was happening. I think, so we had all the information, we knew how to do it. That was what that report on the 21st was all about. So we could have avoided much of the autumn wave. We wouldn't have avoided everything, but we could have reduced the incidence. And if we'd have then put the longer term measures in place, we could have kept it low. Over the autumn, cases would have happened. Some people would, unfortunately, have been hospitalised and died. It would have happened. But as it was, we let it go. And, and so when we did eventually, as I'd explained on the 20th with the Prime Minister, I said the decision isn't to lock down or not. The decision is either you do it now and get on top of this epidemic and control the epidemic, or you let it control you. And it will force you into a lockdown at a later date when you'll have to lock down harder and longer, and many people will die as a consequence. And unfortunately, that is what happened. Over that autumn, from around 20 to 25,000 people died. And there is, some would have done, but there's no reason for that number of people to have died at all. And then we entered the winter phase with our hospitals full. NHS staff having been under stress for months, as opposed to having, they could have been doing routine stuff that autumn and clearing the backlog and that was not the case. And then we got hit by the alpha wave, and so on top of all of this pressure, we then had this new virus that was, it took a little while, a couple of weeks to work out, but it was significantly more transmissible. Even worse, though we didn't know this until January, it was also more pathogenic. So we couldn't have been worse prepared, really.
Why did the lockdown from the beginning of November to the beginning of December not bring the levels of incidence, the overall rate, down enough to stop the re-emergence of the greatest part of that second wave, in fact, the peak in January?
So it wasn't as stringent as the original lockdown. The key reason that schools were open, and I think everybody wanted the schools to be open, but there were other things. So there had been slight adjustments in who would be key workers and things like that.
Was it long enough?
Well, if it had been done earlier on, if it had been done, in September, it would have been plenty long enough. Or we could have done it around half term. So you'd have had the combination of the schools being closed. As it was, it happened just after half term. It was really made no. Again, it showed there was no real strategy, no long-term thinking. Instead of just bouncing into a panic decision, as opposed to taking a strategic view of it and getting a grip of the epidemic and doing what was necessary when it was necessary.
Is that why, on account of all the things that you say were not done that should have been done, and because the consequence is so terrible that you describe in your statement that second wave was, for you, the worst moment of the epidemic?
I said it publicly at the time. I really did think it was truly awful. And of course, it was. Another 65,000 people died over the next few months.